Hi, everybody. Welcome to this panel. It's valuing Bitcoin education. It's the value of Bitcoin education. We got, I guess, 3 Bitcoin educators is what we'd probably call ourselves. Natalie, you're the host of Coin Stories. Ella Hough, you're doing amazing things at your university, starting Bitcoin clubs, as well as even working in this space now this summer. And so why don't you guys just introduce yourself a little bit in case people don't know anything about you. I'm sure they do, though.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sam, for the kind introduction. My name is Ella Hough. I am going into my senior year at Cornell, and while I'm there, I started the Cornell Bitcoin Club. Also started my own Bitcoin major there, which is exciting. And then outside of school, I co-founded the Bitcoin Students Network, which, as Sam mentioned, it's really how can we start Bitcoin clubs on universities around the world. So right now we have clubs or nodes in about 31 countries, and then another nonprofit called Generation Bitcoin, which, thank you for the sound. We have brought about 1,400 students to the conference this week. So yes, lots of different initiatives, but grateful to be here with you both.
Everyone come listen. I don't know if you can hear me.
I don't know if it's super.
1, 2, 1, 2, testing, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing one. Okay.
There you go.
We're going to tell some fun stories. Thank you so much. I host a podcast. I did not intend to work in Bitcoin. I was a journalist, and I was frustrated with where the world was going, and I was reporting on all of it day to day. I saw people working harder, but making less, especially in purchasing power, and feeling more divided and frustrated and not having hope. And I saw that reflected in my own life. And then somehow, thank goodness, I came across Bitcoin, and I started to see it as the solution to all the problems and symptoms I was reporting on. And so I decided to dedicate all of my time to learning it, understanding it, because I was so skeptical. I needed to learn what money is. I needed to understand how the internet worked, honestly. I didn't understand networks and technology systems. And then I came to the conclusion that Bitcoin will fix pretty much everything. And I started my podcast as a hobby, and I'm so grateful that I get to reach so many people now on a weekly basis, and we have so many people to reach. There are so many people who are not in Bitcoin yet. They need to hear the message. They need to be met where they are, because it's a difficult message to digest. And I was telling them earlier, we can kind of get into it. I was just on a podcast trying to explain Bitcoin to a newcomer. She's like a political commentator and podcaster, and it's so hard to get people's mind to open and start thinking outside of the box of the framework that they're so entrenched in with the fiat system and debt and the dollar, to open up their mind that actually Bitcoin is this revolutionary tool of empowerment. So I can't wait to get into all of it.
Yeah, maybe that is a good place to start, is where do you guys start if you got a newcomer in front of you who's curious about Bitcoin? What's your best strategies to kind of get them on board? Maybe start with you, Ella.
Sure, happy to. I think my first place is I just listen. So tangible example, I started the Cornell Bitcoin Club this past year in January, and we now have 65 members, and it's people from all across the school, athletes, biology majors, law, business, everyone's there. And so I was like, okay, this is amazing. We have a group of people who otherwise wouldn't be together, know each other, all curious about Bitcoin. And so rather than me just, go on what I think is interesting, I tried to just open it up and hear what people had questions about and really let them guide how the club ran for that semester. So with guidance from me on some frameworks of where we could go, but my number one strategy is probably just listen and try to just answer their questions initially. But Natalie, you're quite an expert on this as well.
Well, it's a really interesting experience because everyone is so different, and depending on their pain points within the fiat system, some people don't have very noticeable pain points because maybe they're successful in real estate or equities. But it can be challenging. And if someone else is guiding the questions first, like I was being interviewed, right? And I don't want to make the person feel dumb, like they're not understanding it. And I also can't guide the questions the way I want to go and listen to them. They're asking me the questions. And it's so funny how sometimes we forget, because we're so far down the rabbit hole, what it was like to literally ask the most basic, fundamental questions about money, value, like who issues these currencies? Why? What is debt? What is credit? How do we all interact with one another economically? And so today was a little bit challenging. I don't know how well I did. I'll have to play it back, and I'm always my own worst critic. But I think that absolutely you have to listen to where people are and ask questions. But when you're in a position where they're asking you questions, sometimes it can be a little tough. And you always, I think, have to come back to the fundamentals. What is money? Who issues it? How do we communicate value? And is there someone at the center of that relationship or interaction? Do they need to be? Is the money actually money, or is it an IOU? Is it credit? Because one thing that I think people know intuitively, but we don't acknowledge enough in society, is that all the money that's floating around on electronic ledgers, it doesn't exist physically. The modern bank has 5 to 10x amount of demand deposits as it does cash reserves, which is 500 to 1,000% leverage. In the great financial crisis, we increased that to like 2,300x leverage. So we live in a system where we can't all just call upon our banks to withdraw our money, and we take that for granted. And so now you're introducing the idea of a decentralized ledger that no one can control, and it's hard for people to wrap their minds around it. They're like, well, where is that ledger? Can't someone just change the ledger? Does it exist in the cloud? Well, most people don't understand that clouds are very centralized today, right? There's an Apple cloud, there's a Google cloud, there's a centralized server, and things can get hacked or taken down, like we saw just a week ago with CrowdStrike. So I think it's really hard to get people to wrap their mind around something new, and you have to be really patient, because we were all there once.
Sam, do you have a strategy that you like as well?
I mean, I think you guys hit on a couple of great ones, which is know your audience. I've educated, lately it's more like institutional investors, the fund managers, pension funds, endowments, and I got to understand how they think. So I'm always talking about boring stuff like Sharpe ratios and diversification and things like that. But I actually find the conversations with newcomers to be even more challenging, because I have to challenge myself to explain it simply. And I think Richard Feynman said, to explain something simply is a sign of mastering the topic. And so I always think about that. So I always challenge myself, like, how can I explain this better? Like, how can I explain this more easily? And if I get that blank look, that's on me, because I'm not explaining the topic as well as I possibly could be. And I think it's what you guys are saying, and Natalie was just saying, is how early we really are still. I mean, it's so hard to explain this, but most people don't even think about money. And Natalie and I were joking like a few months back about, just imagine if somebody back in the 80s was a Bitcoiner, but they were just talking about email, right? And they came to like a dinner party or a happy hour and were just like, hey guys, I've been thinking about mail a lot. Why do we send letters? This is weird. Why don't we use the internet? Why don't we send email? Why do we do stamps? And everyone would be looking at them being like, why is this person obsessed with mail? What the hell is going on? Why are they talking about this email? The same thing is today with money. People just don't think about money and this, what is the dollar? Where does it come from? And it's so funny because it's one of the most important things of everyone's life. It's what they spend all their time working for, but they don't just stop and think about that. So you have to bring it down to first principles. What Natalie was just saying, what is money? And you have to start there. And that's usually where I begin, is explaining the problem. Why do prices continue to rise? That's not some natural phenomenon. That's actually a symptom of central bank policy manipulating the money, and it causes all these downward effects on society. That I think that's why we're all passionate about it. And so I guess I just keep it simple. I try to keep it as simple as I can, know my audience, and tailor my jargon that I use, as well as what message would resonate with them the most to kind of get them to understand why this is important. Yeah.
And Natalie, I think you had such a good point about pain points, because just with anything in life, it's hard to make a change unless you feel that pain. And so highlighting that or trying to pull it out, just reflecting on my own journey, it wasn't until like going to the Oslo Freedom Forum, shout out to HRF, and learning about, being unbanked, or if you don't have financial freedom, how all your other freedoms and rights are kind of open to manipulation. And so
I've even found that sometimes you have to find people's sympathy for other people's pain points if they don't have a pain point of their own. That's the challenge with people that have done really well with real estate. A lot of people have generated a ton of wealth, and to me it's very illusory because these homes are not worth what they're priced at. It's ridiculous that old dilapidated houses that someone bought in the 1970s with one wage are now millions of dollars and completely out of reach for the next generation. I don't see the value in the price that's being offered, but I think that those folks just have a difficult time because they have monetized things like real estate. And so to tell them now that there's this currency that's going to demonetize potentially what they've generated so much wealth on, well, you don't want to be told that, right? I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to be told if all of my savings were in my house that all of a sudden my house is going to come crashing down in value. So you have to be sensitive to where people are at with their monetary decisions. And also, I mean, most people don't own assets. If you look at the world, I saw this post the other day and it really put things into perspective that we are so fortunate here. We really are. And not only just being the reserve currency, being closest to the global money printer and all the downstream effects for other nations, but even though people struggle here, we are so much more fortunate than so many other places. And if you guys haven't read Broken Money by Lynn Alden, I think you should all read it because it gives you such perspective on what it actually has meant to be the global reserve currency, the disadvantages that has created for us, especially the working class, and what all the other countries have dealt with because they can't issue and print the reserve currency, but their debts are denominated in dollars. So we've impoverished many nations and we've prevented them from developing. Isn't it sad that we still have so many nations that are yet to be developed when, we have all this technology and everything has, grown to the rate that it has, but yet so many people are still disenfranchised, and those are the people that will get Bitcoin first, and they are.
Yeah, I go back and forth too about, education is super important to get people on board and understand why this technology is useful today to billions of people probably, and also to help protect themselves against currency debasement. But I do think about a lot of people are going to have to learn the hard way. And it's up to us to put out the education so that when they start to look for alternatives, when they realize they can't afford the essentials and what's going on, they finally go down that fiat rabbit hole and they find Bitcoin, that the educational resources are there for them. But it's not just what is Bitcoin, because they'll get through that. But then it's, how do I use Bitcoin? Like, how do I buy it? How do I self-custody? How do I use a hardware wallet? And that's why, Natalie, you do tutorial videos of hardware wallets. BTC Session does a lot of great content like this as well. There's different types of content that are going to become very, very important. And they are right now, but they will continue to be important, which is, what is Bitcoin? And then, how do I use Bitcoin in a way that can protect myself with good security, but also use it in a sovereign way?
I have a question to ask both of you when it comes to education. So I don't know if you saw the post from Troy Cross, but he published a really interesting report on the profile of a Bitcoiner, the average Bitcoiner. Who are they? Where are they? Are they a man, a woman, Republican, Democrat, somewhere in the middle? Do they have a lot of money? Do they not? And there were some surprising results there. Some of them maybe not so surprising, but predominantly the average Bitcoiner is a young male, all over the board politically.
Sounds right.
No one, not super conservative, not super liberal, some are in the all over the board. Why do you think that is, and how do we get other people, other generations, other genders, how do we get everyone into Bitcoin?
Well, so I've been looking into kind of some statistics on younger generations and just the mood and where it's going. And it's really sad to also find that younger generations, their number one fear above like personal safety or anything is their financial security and safety. And a lot like hopelessness and loneliness are off the charts. And so to what Sam was saying, you're going to have to feel it the hard way. Unfortunately, I think some of, the hard pain coming in will bring more people in. I don't know, this is just my data backing this opinion, but in the early stages of Bitcoin, very kind of CS, coder, that was some of the theme vibe, and maybe just young women weren't as interested in that, but I think it's turning.
Well, I think one thing you see with Bitcoin adoption is there's this generational divide. Tom Lee just talked about this, but it's so true because we're more technologically savvy. We grew up in a digital age. We understand how something can have value that's not tangible. And so even when you looked at some of these recent bills that passed in Congress, they had bipartisan support, but they were mostly young representatives or senators, and the older folks said no. And so there is this generational divide of acceptance of Bitcoin. And I think, again, education is a part of that. I think it's a shame because I worry about the older generation because they're typically highly allocated to bonds and other forms of paper that are going to be devalued, and they don't have the time to make up for those losses. And so it's actually really important that they start to understand this. And so if you have parents and grandparents, and you're in this room, it's up to you guys to educate them and help protect themselves because they need Bitcoin too. And in terms of the men versus women, like I don't pretend to be fully understanding of women. You guys probably be better. I think men are typically have more risky behavior, and so Bitcoin has been considered risky with the volatility, over in its early years for sure, in its early adoption. I think women I don't know. Like, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts, because I think it's a low-hanging fruit. I don't understand why younger women, I think, are perfect for this next wave of orange pilling because they have money, they are technologically savvy, they will start to a lot of them manage the household finances even, and
they're doers. I think really
they're
hard
doers.
work.
Yeah, so I think that's actually where I see when I look at the demographics of Bitcoin holders, there's a gap there that I think is going to get filled, and it's young women that are going to be this new wave of users. But how do we get them in?
I'm working on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but you've said in your analysis before that the next wave will be millennial women. They are not invested in the same way that their counterparts are, and they do have money. And increasingly, millennials are set to inherit a lot of money. I wish I was one of those. I'm not going to inherit anything, but they are going to inherit a lot of assets from older generations, and they're going to need to decide how to allocate those. It's interesting what you said about risk, because I would agree with you in general. I would say that my girlfriends were a little bit more risk averse and a little bit more conservative, but people view Bitcoin as risky, and now that I know it as well as I do, I think everything else is far riskier to invest in than Bitcoin, including most equities and real estate. But I've thought about this quite a bit because it's been a mission of mine to make it a more welcoming space to women. First of all, I just think when you don't see yourself reflected in a community, it feels intimidating. I felt that way in 2021 when I came with my girlfriend to my first Bitcoin conference, and I had recorded a few episodes of my podcast just for fun, and I just wanted to meet people and meet some of the mentors or the people that I admired in the space. And I just looked around and I thought, wow, I feel a little lonely. There's no women. So the next year I planned my first Women of Bitcoin brunch, and that was amazing. We filled a restaurant with 100 women. Last year, 250. This year, 300, and we have a wait list of almost 200 women. So they're hungry for this. But I think that, it's great, right? It's awesome. Super exciting. But one thing that I've thought about is how, for women, the women that I know in my life, what's really important to them is community and people, relationships. They love building and nurturing relationships, which I think is one of the most beautiful qualities about a woman. And I think Bitcoin does need a woman's touch in many ways. Yeah. And guys, for the most part, and this is not this is just a generalization for the most part. There are grays, of course, in every situation, but I feel like guys are more interested naturally in tinkering with things, problem solving. They're drawn to things like engineering and mathematics and technology. And women are driven more into careers that relate to people and community. So that's why you see more women in communication, public relations, PR, all that. You see men in technology, science, math. Now, women are capable of all of that, right? And I'm a big believer. I'm a freedom maximalist. You go for it. You want to do it. But it's helpful when you see people and voices like yours that you can look to and say, if she can do it, I can do it. And I think it's important for us to be those voices. You for the generation that's going to look to you and say, oh, I'm Gen Z and I can economically empower myself through Bitcoin. Me, my own generation, millennials, whoever you represent in any industry, everyone can make a little bit of an impact, and I think it's beautiful when we come together. I just think that Bitcoin's for everyone. I say it all the time, but I really do, and I love that it's growing more in terms of women, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
And I think it's something so nice about Mi Primera, the community focus, all of the nodes around the world, because no matter who you are, you have something to add to the Bitcoin education narrative. Everyone has a different experience that's valuable. So just have those conversations, even just one person, one side, you're checking out at Trader Joe's. Like, that's very meaningful as well.
Yeah, I think it's the value of education. I think everybody in this room probably understands how important Bitcoin is as a technology for freedom, also as a way to build wealth over time right now. It's an amazing opportunity, and it's an amazing opportunity because there's a lot of information asymmetry right now. The world generally doesn't understand this thing, and that's why the opportunity exists. And so when I look out at why more corporations aren't following MicroStrategy and putting it on their balance sheet, or some of the energy FUD around Bitcoin that is shifting, it's really the data's on our side and the truth is on our side about what this thing is, and it's just a matter of getting more people to understand it to push its adoption. And so what corporations before, there was some barriers with the accounting rules, that all changed, and all these barriers dropped. Now what's stopping them? Well, they just don't understand it yet. And that's an amazing opportunity to educate all these treasurers around the world who are managing, trillions of dollars, not billions, trillions, to get them onto the Bitcoin standard and drive its adoption. And so that's the value of education right now, is the truth is on our side. And that's why, even with the energy FUD, it was always amazing because you'd read these New York Times articles, it'd be riddled with falsehoods and misinformation about just completely misunderstanding what Bitcoin mining is. But there's operators on the ground. ERCOT was literally saying how useful it is. And so that's just information asymmetry, and we are going to win because the truth is on our side, and it's just a matter of educating people appropriately to get them on our side, because everybody needs to understand that Bitcoin is for everybody and that it could really benefit our world, our country, and every single individual in it. So,
I'm curious, what do you both think is something that's doing really well in Bitcoin education, but also where there's room for improvement or room to be added to the space?
Well, I really look at my industry that I came from, mainstream journalism, and I have hope. I'm really positive because I do think that Bitcoin, the message spreads to everyone, maybe not as quickly as we want it to, but it's just so sad because I didn't realize that these gatekeepers of information are still so powerful in the legacy world. They have been decentralized quite a bit through media, through independent podcasters, and I'm excited about that because before there was decentralized money, the internet decentralized information and communication, which is ultimately a great thing, but also the onus is on us to make sure that we verify and fact check because it is tough right there. You can literally go out and find reflected exactly what you want to hear. If you want to see a total negative worldview and the world's coming to an end and markets are about to crash, you will find it. If you want to hear the hopium and S&P's going to go to 20,000 and Bitcoin's going to 1 million, you will find that. And it's like, how do you decipher what is reality? Because none of us can predict human behavior in such a complex system as a global economy. So it's tough, but my wish is that more journalists do their jobs of holding the powerful people accountable, not being their lapdogs, but being the watchdogs, and investigate the money, because all of it comes back to money, and I didn't get that. I thought it was a political issue. Oh, we need to redistribute the wealth and tax the rich. I was so wrong. And that's why I sympathize with people who have those views, because they just don't understand money. They don't understand economics. And you have to be a little bit patient, because it's not necessarily their fault. They can do something about it, and we can all encourage them, but the information that people are getting is so skewed, it's biased, it's some of the most disappointing examples of what journalism should be lately, and I'm sad about that, because it's an industry I saw having so much impact and nobility, which is why I pursued it. And I feel like I've done much more meaningful work in Bitcoin and highlighting a spotlight on what's wrong with the system rather than reporting on the symptoms of the problems.
It's a tough question. I mean, where are we falling short with education? I think oftentimes, going back to our earlier comments, it's easy to forget that we all started from zero with Bitcoin, and like how we didn't understand anything about it. It's a new technology. So getting more beginner-friendly content and remembering that that's important, and resurfacing old content that is really good, like evergreen, that helped us on our journey. Sometimes it gets lost, but there's blog posts from 2018, 2019, videos from 2014 that are excellent, that beginners need to know about, and you just resurface them for people instead of just creating new stuff just for the hell of it. Because somebody's probably already said it, and they probably said it really well. And you don't have to do all that extra work anyway, so just resurface the old content. And then I personally hate models. I think models are all broken, and they're going to be broken, and it's only a matter of time before they're proven wrong. And so models can be a problem, because people get really fixated on them, and they say the price is going to go here because of this correlation and blah, 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 and it gets everyone sucked in. And what it can lead to is end of cycle, where everyone gets these expectations that it's going to get here, and then they panic, and then they sell, and then it's this whole thing, and then they leave saying this model broke, so Bitcoin's broken. So I think models can be dangerous. Some are useful, but most are proven wrong eventually, and so just know that. And so careful with models, that's all I'll say.
I had a teacher once, and he was like, yeah, the only thing for certain you know about models is that they're wrong. They're complete.
Right. That's fair. Especially with something like Bitcoin, it's very, very difficult.
I also think, especially for younger generations, having more hands-on learning by doing education is where we, could hopefully have more in the future. More internships, more jobs, because to Natalie earlier, the point about seeing the pain point, if you're actually working in the industry, and I've appreciated this recently, it's not just some concept that exists or something you read about or hear about, but no, it's real, and you can see how this is playing out. And so I would love to also see more education kind of in a circle roundabout way through that, especially for younger generations.
I'm so proud of what you're doing. And I know that I think you should share some of the story of just, it's not easy. There's so much pushback. I faced it when I tried to do Bitcoin stories in my career, and ultimately it made me decide eventually to leave, because I knew I would not be able to change the network from within. I had to just go off and focus on Bitcoin and hope that people watch and learn and listen. But you face a lot of opposition. I've been trying to be more thoughtful about that, because if we look back at history, whenever there was a new technology or a scientific revolution, there are so many stakeholders that are not willing to hear how things are going to change, because that change is scary for them. And we see that today, because this is threatening in some ways to some of the biggest, most powerful institutions that we have in existence. And so to tell them that now they will be obfuscated by this peer-to-peer technology, how do you introduce that message in that sly, roundabout, Trojan horse, pleasant, cheerful, constructive way where they don't automatically want to go to war with you? Because that's the thing. We don't want them to go. Do you want Trump to be against Bitcoin? Do you want Kamala Harris to be against Bitcoin? Do you want Larry Fink to be against Bitcoin? What do you get from them being against it? Don't we want everybody to be for it? And how do we meet all of those people, understanding their backgrounds, their incentives, what they have at stake? How do we introduce the message in a way where they will embrace it for everyone so we can all benefit from it? Because right now we've come really far, but we're also really early, and there are still a lot of obstacles in the way, I think. I think we're moving in the right direction, but it's not going to be a cakewalk where we're just all of a sudden going to have, our debt is going to disappear, Bitcoin's going to be the reserve asset in the currency. We've got a lot of moves that we need to make, and we need to be strategic ourselves, and we need to be, I think, kind and polite along the way, because people are naturally resistant to something that opposes their comfort zone and maybe what they have at stake in something.
No, I agree, and that's part of where all the student initiatives, clubs, it was really because you're not going to find Bitcoin education in mainstream education. If the goal of college is to go, or high school, wherever you are, go really learn something that's not known. Have interesting conversations with all of the incredibly smart people around you. For me, I felt like Bitcoin was the best catalyst that I could kind of do that in, and so I said, hey, I want to study this. And they said, no, you shouldn't study something that's 13, 14 years old. We think you can benefit from staying in an established curriculum. And then 15 months later, it was approved. And now, even within the program, I've had people say, like, oh, I thought this was a bad idea, but, the school's slogan is any person, any study. But now they're asking me for books, and they're curious, and they're interested. So.
That's so cool.
Everyone's against Bitcoin before they're for Bitcoin, so we just gotta turn them all. And at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, right? They can't, if they're not going to drink it, they'll get it at the price they deserve many years from now. But I do think that it's what's the saying? You attract more
bees with honey.
What's the saying?
Flies
with honey, right? Yeah. So we should be sweeter about the message. I try to do that because, again, I don't think that everyone that is against you or has a different political view is a bad person. I think that some of them are really misinformed. And I think differing views are healthy. And if we were a more decentralized capitalistic society, we would have more beautiful dynamic diversities, and we wouldn't feel such, I think, pressure to just go against one another. I think there would be more of an incentive to actually cooperate and provide value. And right now, everyone's just fighting to make money. I love that. I'm releasing an episode with Parker Lewis tomorrow, and he said the most brilliant but simple thing. It was like, there's a difference between making money and providing value or creating value. Value is different than money. And we're all fighting over slips of paper that are increasingly worth less and less. But we see every day our food quality, our home quality, the products and services that we all purchase and need to survive, they're deteriorating in quality and value. Why? But they're getting more expensive. And we need to root out sort of this the monopoly and the corruption within the system. The core is a manipulated currency that's controlled by a few at the expense of everyone else. And Bitcoin is the only solution I've found that has a chance at doing that. And it won't take 2 years. It'll probably take the next 100. But I really believe that we will get there, and that's why I have hope in the future.
Bitcoin is hope. I just think it's so awesome that you're majoring in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think you get to say major in Bitcoin, and then your tassel should be orange, when you graduate.
That's so good.
I know. It's
yes.
so cool.
I know the cords, you can order those, and you'll get an orange one.
Yeah. It's so cool.
So cool. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I got like a couple minutes. I don't know if anybody has
questions?
questions or anything for any of us.
Not yet, but it's all open source, so you can find it if any other student anywhere wants to do it. But right now, it's just me. And I will say, there are people that have written theses before. And so I'm not the first to ever do this in an academic setting. But yes, would love more.
Natalie, we love your interviews with Colonel McGregor.
Thank you.
The vets love him. It's awesome. Bring him on again.
I'm talking to him in a week. So he'll be back on. It was so funny because I listened to his show. I'm a big consumer of videos and information. I try to listen and watch as much as I can. And he was someone that I did not know was a Bitcoiner. I was just curious about his geopolitical takes, and he talked a little bit about things that Bitcoiners talk about, right? That it's an empire of debt. We're on the decline. Our strength as geopolitically is changing, and we're entering a more multipolar world. So my intention was just to kind of pull on those strings. And halfway through the first interview, he's like, "And that's why I own Bitcoin." And I was like, "Oh my God." So I love when people have coming out stories of their Bitcoin journey on my show, where all of a sudden they're Bitcoiners and no one knew it.
That was a huge surprise.
Yeah. I love the Colonel too.
Colonel's great.
Anybody
else?
Going once, twice. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.